Hey everybody, welcome back to Go Local Live here in the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. Our last guest of the hour, Sam Bell, he's here. He's running for Senate District 5. And we had one of his opponents in just last week. Welcome, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
So, primary election coming up, just a few days away now.
Yes.
And so where's the campaign at now? How's it going?
It's been really fun. The best part of the campaign for me has been talking to so many of my constituents, going around, walking through the district, hearing their stories. And people are really struggling here in Providence. You know, I've heard some truly devastating stories. A lot of folks upset about a lot of the basic breakdown of city services. You know, since the tax cuts for the rich, and Rhode Island slashed taxes for the rich by more than any state in all of American history except for North Dakota, our roads have gotten into truly terrible condition. And honestly, our schools are in even worse condition. Property taxes have gone through the roof, houses, apartments, businesses, especially on cars. But where they cut the deepest, of course, healthcare. Talked to a woman kicked off her Medicaid, middle of her cancer treatment. Has to pay $30,000 for the chemotherapy she just needed to stay alive. Talked to another woman, didn't know she was kicked off. Concussion, head scan, $15,000 bill. No way to pay it. I don't think it's right. So I'm running in the primary against the incumbent, Jabor, because I really don't agree with his positions on the issues, from his votes to cut Medicaid to his bills to cut taxes for the rich, even more.
And so if you are elected, what concrete steps do you plan on taking to help right some of these wrongs you see in Providence?
Well, as I tell a lot of people, I'm not going to lie. What I want to do is to take on the systemic problems that have been truly devastating our city. That means pushing back against the agenda that has dominated our legislature for years. I want to repeal the tax cuts for the rich, but guarantee you, the state Senate does not. I want to get rid of that law that my opponent co-sponsored that forces Providence to subsidize all that luxury housing on the I-195 land by letting the agency that did the 38 studios deal through their subcommission, the I-195 Commission, spend our Providence taxpayer money on 15 and 20-year tax breaks that have mostly gone to luxury housing. It's bankrupting the city, and it's wrong when we spend less than a tenth per capita Massachusetts does on affordable housing, but you better believe that those developers who get all those special tax breaks are one of the most powerful special interests in the General Assembly. And that's not going to be an easy fight. As I tell all my constituents, I'm not going to promise you that in the first 2 years, I'm going to be able to turn around what our legislature has done to our state. I can only promise you what I'm going to fight for, but you lose every fight that you don't take on.
That's a really great approach to it. I know a lot of people worry about the whole campaign promises of, oh, on my first day in office, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and it's going to be fixed, and everything's going to be great within a week. But sometimes it is better to take that longer view and say, oh, these are big issues that we really need to tackle over the long term.
I think as a legislator, it's really hard to say, I'm going to control everything the legislature is going to do. If you're running for an executive position, you need to take responsibility. And far too few of our executives here in Rhode Island do. And you should be held accountable for your lack of concrete results. But in a legislative position, you should be held accountable for what you accomplish. But I do not believe that it's right to go around and overpromise and say you're going to fix everything when there's no way you can, when the legislature goes so hard against the ideals that most Rhode Islanders, especially most Rhode Island Democrats, hold true.
And so you mentioned Rhode Island schools have been
Yes.
suffering, and that has been a big theme in Rhode Island. In past months, Governor Raimondo has been pushing for her big, she's calling it a once-in-a-lifetime investment into schools to really help build them back up. What do you think really needs to be done to help improve our schools?
I mean, let's start with the basics. The fundamental problem with the schools has been the destruction of the city budgets by the General Assembly. Started with devastating the city budget to pay for the tax cuts for the rich. We have to repeal the tax cuts for the rich so we can finally talk about where to invest instead of always talking about where to cut. Then we also do have to talk about all those special tax breaks that have been forced on cities, especially Providence, that are also bankrupting the city, forced by the state. including, yes, the mall deal, which is about $20 million a year. It's bankrupting the city, and you cannot have a city with a broken budget that has solvent schools, that have real investments in the schools. Secondly, we do need to change how we govern the schools from the state level. And yes, there are management problems with the schools at the city level. It's very difficult to do anything about it in the state senate. What we can do something about is the way RIDE governs the schools, Rhode Island Department of Education. One of the things I really disagree with is the new initiatives that they've been trying to push to roll back human teachers and move towards computerized education. I don't believe it works, and the data are very clear. You know, I learned how to, the big push here, of course, is with computer science. That's been the big testing ground. The idea is instead of hiring new computer science teachers, we go out and we create these modules that we buy from private companies where the kids get to play logic games, but they never actually write any lines of code. I learned how to program. It's a skill I use every day in my work as a geologist on the Brown data science group. And I would have never learned how to program if I hadn't been taught by a human teacher. And so I really believe that human touch is necessary. The big push away from human teaching, I think, is fundamentally misguided. And we need to really take a hard look at the policies that are pushed down from the Department of Education at the statewide level.
And so another big thing that's been very, very talked about this primary season has been debates and the lack thereof. Do you think, especially in the primaries, which in Rhode Island a lot of times are more hotly contested than the general, do you think they're really important to the race?
Of course debates are really important. You know, I had a conversation with my opponent about, I told him I wanted to have a debate on the issues. He told me I want to have a debate instead on residency. But he did ultimately agree to have one debate on the issues at the WBNA. It's going to be right before the election, the night before the primary. I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a really important clarifying moment in this election.
Do you think that gives voters enough time so close to the election to really make the best decision?
No, but I'm happy that we got at least one debate. So look, there are plenty of elections in which you don't get any at all. I'm happy that Jabor agreed to at least one.
And speaking about the gubernatorial debates as well, what are your thoughts on the silence that's been coming from both sides? We haven't had any confirmed debates ahead of the primary. It doesn't look like that's going to end up happening before the 12th. What are your thoughts on that?
I think no matter where you stand in the gubernatorial primary, I think everyone agrees that the gubernatorial candidates should debate. And I think that that's just a fundamental and basic thing. And even people from the Raimondo campaign and the Fung campaign have privately told me they agree that there should be a debate, and plenty of supporters of both those candidates both agree that there should be a debate. And I think that that's pretty widely agreed on. I really think it's important that we have that debate because it's really important, not just for helping decide the election, but it's a really important clarifying moment to help us have a real conversation about public policy in Rhode Island. And debates are an incredibly important part of the political process. We really should have them.
And so as we get towards the primary, what would you say to your voters? What's the most important thing for them to know about you? What would you like to say directly to them?
Look, for me, this election has been about one thing, and it has been about the issues. And it's been about the basics. We're not talking about anything crazy here. We're talking about the fundamental, really the democratic agenda, really the core, real democratic values that we, as Democrats in Rhode Island, should hold true to. That does mean repealing the tax cuts for the rich. Everyone always talks about how we're going to find money and how we're going to invest in programs. There is a very simple solution. Repeal the tax cuts for the rich. Yes, it does mean getting rid of the Medicaid cuts, which have been brutal, which have been so cruel, have hurt people so much. And yes, it does mean saving a woman's right to choose here in Rhode Island. You know, I'm very proud to have been endorsed by Planned Parenthood. My opponent was endorsed by Right to Life, as he has been for years. I've also been endorsed by the National Organization for Women. It's one of the biggest differences in this race. Rhode Island has an abortion ban on the books, and we lose Roe v. Wade at the national level. Will snap back into place, probably. I believe we cannot allow that to happen. But honestly, right now, the top leadership of the state Senate is all endorsed by Right to Life. The only way we get this done is if we win primaries like this one, so that we can actually have a pro-choice Senate. So that's one of the biggest, highest stakes issues in this election, but it is also about the rest of that fundamental Democratic agenda, repealing the tax cuts for the rich and getting rid of the Medicaid cuts.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Sam. We really do appreciate it. And of course, the primary's coming up soon, and good luck in your debate. And they're moving along quickly
Thank
here
you so
in Rhode
much for
Island.
having me.
And so that does it for this hour here in the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. But stay tuned. Kate's up at 4. You don't want to miss it. She's got more great guests ahead on Go Local Live. For now, I'm your host,